Today, we're gonna have that discussion on which one you should buy, the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X. But let's go ahead and take it out. The reason I decided to do this video is because I've had friends that have kind of been down on the Xbox or vice versa, have been down on the PS5 for no real reason other than the fact that they're fans of one system or the other. And the way that I operate is I'm not a fan of anything. I'm the fan of the thing that makes the most sense to buy and the thing that I feel like is going to give me the most benefit. So in this video, I want to explain the differences between the systems and why you should buy one over the other. So we don't have pricing available yet, and pricing is definitely going to play a big part because no one wants to buy a system that's going to be like, $800. And also there's still the Xbox Series X, which is supposed to be a cheaper system, and we don't have any concrete details about that yet. So this video is purely going to be the PS5 versus the Xbox Series X. Now, one thing that we do have are the specs. The specs have been out for a while now for both systems, so let's go over the PS5. So the PS5 is going to have an AMD Zen 2 based CPU with 8 cores running at 3.5 gigahertz with 16 gigs of GDDR6 memory. And that memory is going to be shared between the system and the graphics. A custom RDNA 2 AMD GPU that puts out 10.28 teraflops. Now, for the Xbox Series X, on the other hand, it's also going to have an 8-core Zen 2 processor running at 3.8 gigahertz and a custom RDNA 2 AMD GPU that outputs 12 teraflops of processing power, and it's also going to have 16 gigs of GDDR6 memory. So it's pretty much an open and shut case, right? So the Xbox Series X is more powerful. PS4 only has 10.28 teraflops. Xbox Series X has 12. Xbox Series X runs at 0.3 gigahertz higher, faster clock speed. Open and shut case, the Xbox Series X is more powerful. Done. Video over. But hold on. It doesn't really matter that much because there's not really that big of a discrepancy when it comes to the power. Like, yes, the Xbox Series X on paper is a little bit more powerful, but there's another component to the system, and that's the hard drive. So if we look at the SSD performance, the PlayStation 5 is taking advantage of the PCI Express Generation 4 speeds, which is like still in its infancy on PC, but its SSD is capable of transferring 5.5 gigabytes of data per second, whereas the Xbox Series X is only capable of transferring 2.4. So why is the hard drive so important? The main advantages of both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X is being able to load assets quickly from the hard drive. So with these specs, as far as the hard drive, the PlayStation 5 has the advantage, which could translate to faster load times and also just being able to load more assets into the game because you can load them more quickly. In reality, though, the power difference and the SSD difference probably won't make much of a difference aside from first-party titles, because most likely developers are going to develop for the most popular system and then port it over to the other system. And in that case, in both cases, they're probably still going to be limited by the lowest common denominator. Now, it's possible that third-party games could possibly run a little bit faster on the Xbox if they're being, GPU limited by the PlayStation 5's hardware, or games could load faster on the PS5 if they're being limited by the Xbox's SSD, but I don't really think that there's really going to be a real advantage either way, like a noticeable advantage in most cases for third-party titles. Furthermore, if we look at the gameplay and the games announced so far, what Sony has shown makes the PlayStation 5 look like it's more powerful than the Xbox Series X graphics-wise, even though obviously on paper the Xbox Series X is more powerful. And that's because they've had a stronger first-party lineup that they've shown so far. If you look at games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Gran Turismo, Spider-Man Miles Morales, they've done a great job of showing, like, hey, look at how fast these assets are loading into the world. Look at all the destructibility, like with Ratchet & Clank. Look at the ray tracing when you look at Gran Turismo. And during Xbox's showcase, their big title was Halo Infinite. And if you followed any gaming news, you know that a lot of people were very critical about the graphics, and 343 has actually come out and said that they're still working on improving the graphics. The other thing you can point to is Forza, which is another first-party title, but they barely showed anything. It was mostly a cinematic trailer. They didn't show off like the ray tracing reflections like they did on the PS5 with Gran Turismo. So I think as far as showing what the system is capable of and why you should buy the new system, PlayStation has definitely done a better job. And again, they've managed to show what they can do with their first party titles in this hardware, and Microsoft has kind of failed at that. Speaking of ray tracing is going to be a crucial selling point to both these systems, because on PC, as of right now, even if you have a ray tracing card, I've recently purchased one, it's such a performance hit that it really hasn't been playable. More recently, with improvements to DLSS 2.0, we've been able to actually get some playable games using ray tracing, but maybe not at the resolutions that we want to with graphical compromises. Both of these systems are going to bring ray tracing at an affordable price. Like the cheapest ray tracing card you can get right now would be an RTX 2060, and that's about $300 for the card itself, not including the other components that you have to buy for the PC, and that's really barely, in most cases, able to do ray tracing at playable frame rates. So for these systems, it is a big advantage to be able to do ray tracing and to bring out a system that's hopefully cheaper than building a PC that'd be capable of doing the same thing. Basically, without getting too in-depth, ray tracing is just basically realistic shadows, realistic lighting based off of where the light is in the world, instead of it just being programmed to the game. Like, okay, this person's lit this way, this person's lit this way, but it doesn't actually look like it will look in real life. That's basically what ray tracing is. It's really cool, and it does make a noticeable difference. And the fact that Microsoft even got on stage to show Halo Infinite without even having ray tracing available for it yet, it just kind of shows that maybe they're a bit behind on their first party titles. And as of right now, Sony's definitely made the most sense and the most compelling argument as to why you should buy their system. But there is more to the story than just what's been shown on stage. The other part of the story is that Microsoft is also developing these games to run on the Xbox One, at least for the next couple of years, and on PC, which is why Halo Infinite could have been disappointing, because they're developing it to also be able to run on the Xbox One. And as we know, the Xbox One is not nearly as powerful as the upcoming Series X. So are they making compromises in order to make these games work? And are they going to have less impressive first-party titles, at least in the near future, while they're developing for Xbox One still, than the PlayStation 5? That's my theory. Maybe there's just been development struggles with, downscaling the game to run on the Xbox One, while still being able to fully take advantage of what the Xbox Series X has to offer. But Microsoft has a completely different approach to this generation than Sony does, which makes comparing these kind of stupid if you think about it. Microsoft's biggest thing is they want you to play their games anywhere. They want you to subscribe to their services. They don't care as much about selling the system. That's why they're saying, hey, you can still use your Xbox One and play these upcoming Xbox Series X games, but if you do get a Series X, it will definitely run better, and you won't have to pay anything to get the upgraded version of the game. And now with their Game Pass Ultimate service, you're getting Xbox Live Gold, which is basically their online service, kind of similar to PlayStation Plus, where you can play games online, and then you also get free games every month. Plus, you're also getting access to Xbox Game Pass on top of that, which is basically a subscription-based service where you can play and download whatever games they have available. So all their first-party games are on Game Pass. Game Pass is also on PC, which doesn't have as robust of a selection as the Xbox version of it, but you still get all their first-party titles to play on PC if you're subscribed to Game Pass. Plus, they're bringing Project xCloud as part of Game Pass Ultimate. And Project xCloud is basically their streaming service, so you'll be able to stream all these games on your phone, unless you have an iPhone, which I already did a video on that. And of course, if you have a Windows device, like a Windows PC or a Windows tablet, you can stream the games. That's going to be included with the service starting in September. So from that perspective, Microsoft's really trying to sell you their services. They're not really as focused on selling the system itself. Like, yeah, it'd be great if you buy the Series X, but if you just have a PC, or if you still have an Xbox One, you can also still play our games. We don't care how you play it, we just want you to play it. And then with them offering Project xCloud, if you think about it, if you don't want to ever buy a Series X and you still have an Xbox One, if you can stream all those games from xCloud even when they stop developing them from Xbox One. So if you just want to play the games and you don't care about them being the best quality and you just want to stream them, in my opinion, that's a compelling reason to stick with the Xbox. And Game Pass is not just Xbox exclusive titles. We have there's a slew of Final Fantasy games up there, including 15. There's Monster Hunter World. They just added Kingdom Hearts to Game Pass. Kingdom Hearts 3. There's all kinds of third-party support on Game Pass. And, the more people they get subscribed to Game Pass, that's going to be more compelling for these third parties to add their games to it, especially with the streaming component being added in. I think the story of Game Pass and Microsoft services is more compelling than the system itself. And I think that Microsoft's been intentionally telling the story. Granted, they haven't done it in the clearest way, where I think that the mainstream fans of the Xbox are even picking up on it, because if you ask a lot of people who just play the Xbox, they play the few games every month. I don't even think they know what Game Pass is. And it really is a great service. And then on top of that, they're also offering their games just to straight out buy on Steam and on the Windows Store on PC. So they're more concerned with selling software and selling services than selling systems. Sony, on the other hand, they believe in the generational split. And I believe that's why at their conference, you saw the games they were working on and they looked a lot better. They showcased what the PS5 can do, because none of these games are being co-developed for PS4. They're all going to be PS5 exclusives. So that's why when we saw stuff like Gran Turismo and Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man, they all looked amazing and they looked like next-gen games that you really couldn't do on the PlayStation 4. In my opinion, the actual graphics themselves weren't that much better, but when you look at the lighting and like Ratchet and Clank, the destructibility and how much stuff they had on screen, that's where you start to see the difference between this generation and what's coming up next. Now, PlayStation has drawn criticism recently because they were asked if they're going to offer a feature like Smart Delivery, which Xbox is offering, and that's basically like if you buy an Xbox One version of the game and you get an Xbox Series X, it'll automatically give you that Series X version for free. Like the system will know, like, hey, this is a Series X, deliver this version of the game. And it's open to third-party developers as well to take advantage of. Sony doesn't have anything like that in place. Now, obviously, they've made it clear that they're not going to co-develop games for PS4 and PS5. All of their exclusives for PS5 are going to be for PS5. So obviously, for their first-party titles, it doesn't matter because you have to have a PS5 to play them. But there's certainly going to be cross-generational games, such as Cyberpunk, that are going to be on both PS4 and PS5. And that developer has already said on Xbox, you're going to automatically get the Xbox Series X version if you buy the Xbox One version. But because Sony doesn't have anything in place, and they pretty much said, hey, it's up to the developer to figure it out, then it just kind of makes it seem like they just don't even care about the people that are migrating from PS4 to PS5 and may have to rebuy games. Now, in both cases, it's still up to the developer. It's just that Microsoft's put tools in place on their system to make it super easy for the developers to do, whereas Sony doesn't really care about it as much. And in all honesty, this is probably only going to be a problem for like the first year or two that the systems are out before people start migrating over to the new systems. Obviously, games that are already working on like the new Assassin's Creed, that's going to be on PS4 and PS5, that's going to be an issue, but the next Assassin's Creed is probably just going to be a PS5 exclusive. So I think that because it's a short-term issue, Sony just doesn't feel like putting the tools in place to deal with something that's probably going to last like a year or so until developers start making PS5 exclusive titles, third-party developers, that is. Whereas Xbox, since they're more committed to making these experiences work on both their previous system and their current system, of course they would put something in place to handle it. But it would be nice if Sony did have something that was formal for developers to take advantage of, where they could easily do this. Now, the other thing that Sony has excelled in, that for some reason Microsoft didn't even attempt this generation, is VR. Now, PlayStation VR is one of the most compelling things about the PlayStation 4 because it offered an entry-level way into VR, and in a lot of ways it's able to compete with what they offer on PC with a lot less power and lesser hardware overall. And I'm talking about the headset and definitely the controllers. But when I tried it, I was impressed. I actually have been playing PC VR for like 3 years exclusively, and I tried the PlayStation VR and I was like, you know what? This is actually pretty close to the experience that you get on PC. And they were able to do it with this old PS4 hardware and these old Move controllers that are over 10 years old. They already said they're going to support it going forward, and I'm excited to see how this is going to run on even better hardware, and hopefully that also includes the headset itself, because they definitely need to refresh the headset and definitely need to refresh the controllers and give us something other than Move controllers. But that is one advantage that you have when buying a PS5. You're still going to get continued support for VR, and it's probably still going to be cheaper, even though we don't know pricing. It's probably still going to be cheaper than buying a PC that's capable of doing it. The only other competition they really have is the Oculus Quest, which in my opinion is awesome, but that's like a whole different thing. But as far as console VR, PlayStation is the only option, and it's a great option. And also they're just focused on a traditional gaming experience. There's really no comparison as far as first party lineup between Sony and Microsoft. Sony has just done a way better job of building their first party lineup with games like Horizon, Spider-Man, God of War, the Uncharted series, Ratchet and Clank, Like the list goes on and on. They have a bunch of compelling first-party exclusives, and if you're invested in those exclusives, then the PlayStation 5 is the way to go. When making the decision, we obviously don't know pricing, but unless one is like way higher than the other, like $100 or $200 higher, I don't think that pricing is going to be the deciding factor for most people. What it really comes down to is you go with PlayStation because you're invested in Sony's first-party game. Or even like the PlayStation VR games, like, you know, Resident Evil 7 is still a PlayStation VR exclusive. They're probably still going to continue to have VR exclusive games like they have Iron Man. So are you invested in Sony's first-party games? Then you should definitely go with PlayStation. And also the other thing is if you do play online a lot, it might depend on what ecosystem your friends are in. If you're on Xbox and you have a lot of friends on PC, it's a lot easier right now. Like Microsoft's been way more open to crossplay, especially on PC, whereas Sony's been kind of closed off to it. So if your friends are playing on PC, if they're playing like Halo and things like that and Gears, then it might make more sense to buy an Xbox. If your friends are on PlayStation and they're all playing the move on PlayStation, it might make more sense to buy a PlayStation even if you're not necessarily sold on their first party titles. Where it makes more sense to me to buy an Xbox is if, for one, you are invested in Microsoft's ecosystem and you want the best console experience that they have to offer. Now, if you already have an Xbox One, they are going to continue to support it with their first party titles. And then of course, there's Game Pass and there's going to be Project xCloud, you know, the streaming service. So in reality, you can kind of go for a while without even buying a new system, and then you still be able to play with people that have the Xbox Series X. As far as the system itself, if you want, you know, one of the best systems, like the most powerful console, graphics wise, and you don't care about either one's first party titles, then on paper, if you take out the SSD, the Xbox is still technically more powerful. But in my opinion, there's really not as much reason to buy the Xbox Series X itself. Like I said, if you have an Xbox One, you're probably going to be able to stream the Xbox Series X games through xCloud even after they stop developing games for the Xbox One. Also, if you already have a powerful PC, you can just sign up for Game Pass and play all the first-party exclusives on PC. So when I'm speaking of buying an Xbox, buying the Xbox specifically, unless you just want a really powerful system, makes a little bit less sense, but Microsoft's package overall is very compelling. Personally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a PlayStation 5. I already have a PC, which honestly, I play all the Xbox exclusives on PC now, and I'm probably just going to stick with that. And that's going to be my way forward. If you already have a PC, it might be worth at least checking out Game Pass if you're interested in playing like Halo or Gears or any of the exclusive games for Xbox. If you do want a system, as far as console-wise, PS5 is the more compelling option. Now, I think that the PS5 will probably be the more successful console, but I think that Microsoft is going to continue to build their services. That's what makes the most sense to me. And who knows, maybe their next system will just be strictly a streaming system, and they'll go forward from there, and then all the downloadable games will just be on PC. Who really knows what's next for Microsoft? In reality, they're two completely different things going in two completely different directions, and I'm excited to see what this next generation is going to be like. So let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know which platform that you're thinking about choosing. You know, we still got to hear the prices, obviously. But the other thing I want to say is there's no reason for people to fight, you know, fanboys, because both experiences are different. Both of them are great in their own ways. And I don't think if you choose either one, it's a bad decision. It just depends on what you want. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and always do at least two things at the same time. Peace.